Not again.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and much, much more. I'm your host, Josh Scar, and joining me, as always, is the only tabaxi, to my knowledge, that has survived an alien attack, Alex. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and ooh, you needed to include check, please, right in the snippet.
Oh, that would have been good.
Oh, so close.
Well, I would have had to cut out a little bit more because there's hello, my baby, hello, my honey. That's a really long intro. We might get copyright struck for that one.
Licensing.
Licensing, I like it. And as you just heard, we are also being joined by Antonio from many podcasts, but among the noteworthy is the Cultworthy, Back to the Balcony, and maybe the MILF and Me still?
Yeah, maybe. If my partner ever decides to get her studio put together like she said she's going to. So I'm not going to say don't hold your breath, but also do cross your fingers because a combination of both might make magic happen.
I want it to come back just for the episode titles.
I know. I have so many listed. I have so many ready to go. And I don't want to have to use them on the Cultworthy because it's not the same brand, but I got gold here. What am I going to do with all this gold?
That's what being a producer is all about. So you just got to find the right show to produce.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Maybe I can produce yours and give you the wacky titles.
I think Dan might be more appropriate, which, speaking of Dan, this last Sunday, he released the Mind Wipe episode that he invited me on for. So definitely check that out. I'll put that in the episode description for this episode. But we are here to talk Alien Romulus. But first, we're going to hear from our friends over at the Game Club Pod, and we'll be right back.
Join me, Joey, and my co-hosts,
Tim.
And Slade.
At the Game Club Podcast, where every 2 weeks we review video games not too dissimilar from a book club. Looking forward to seeing you there, idiots.
Yeah, you stupids.
Tim, do you want to jump in on this?
I will not bandwagon audience abuse.
And we're back. Definitely check out everything that the Game Club Pod has going on. They've got Two Buds from Bama, aka Driveway Beers. You've got Two Blokes from Blighty, plus the regular Game Club Pod stuff, and the anime corner that happens once a month. So lots of stuff happening just on one subscription. Check it out. But we are here to talk about a lot of things happening in one Alien movie, and that is Alien Romulus. So we're going to do non-spoilers and spoiler discussion here. Antonio, let's start with you as the guest. Your initial thoughts. How did you feel walking away from this movie?
Can I talk about how I felt walking into it?
Sure.
Just like any Alien property, I walk into it with the highest, I'm not going to say expectations, but I have the highest amount of reservations of what it's going to do to me. And Prometheus was the start of that because we'll talk about it in detail further down the road, but I'm a fan of the Alien quadrilogy. All 4 films, Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, and Resurrection, which is like the black sheep of the family. It shouldn't be, but it is. I love all 4 of those. I can't say equally, but I will rewatch them all the time. And I have to. It's like with the Rocky movies. If I start with one, I gotta finish. Prometheus was the biggest disappointment of my cinematic and theatrical life. Alien Covenant topped it, so it's made me weary of any Alien property. But I was excited for this one because I like Fede Alvarez. I liked his Evil Dead movie. I liked Don't Breathe. So I had very high expectations for this. But the one thing that I was worried about from the trailers was, damn it, this cast is really young. I hope that doesn't piss me off. And I think at the end of the day, despite all the things that we'll get to in the spoiler section of this, is I was so frustrated by the youth of this cast. It was like watching a Scream film, but in the Alien universe. We're going to get all these youngins off this mining planet, and we're going to alien them in multiple ways. And I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle teenage emotions and the weepies and the sobbies that we are seeing in films like Don't Breathe. And they work in Don't Breathe. And they worked in Evil Dead too, because that is that audience. Those are those stories. But Alien to me is not that property. It's not that license. This was the one for adults. We saw what happened when we threw teenagers in the mix in Alien versus Predator Requiem. It didn't work. And I felt that it was the one major drawback for me in this film, is having such a young cast. That being said, there is a character that I'll go into detail later that I thought was really good. But other than that, the cast is what really kind of killed it for me. And the writing of that script that features such a young cast is what really kind of gave me the weepies, guys, because to me, Alien was like the grown-up sci-fi. You know, in the 70s, you had Star Wars, and then you had Alien, the dark sci-fi, the horror sci-fi. And I feel somehow we've blended the two in this one, and honestly, it just didn't work for me.
You actually kind of triggered something for me. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I feel like there's synergy here. When we were getting ready to watch this movie, and with Back to the Balcony, I've been going back and looking at old Siskel and Ebert reviews, and I was like, did they get a chance to review Alien? Okay, they did.
Mm-hmm.
What did they have to say about it? And I believe it was Siskel who basically just said, oh, it's a slasher movie in space. Like the alien is just Michael Myers. He's just Jason Voorhees. He's just your stereotypical slasher dressed up as an alien. And I was like, how dare you?
Agreed.
Like it was a visceral response of like, you're breaking this down into something that is very basic. We have the benefit of hindsight, our foresight in this sense, of how instrumental this movie is and how great it truly is, where I think he's responding to it in the moment. Like, it just didn't appeal to him for whatever reason. That's fair. But I do think the way he broke it down didn't quite make sense. But with what you were saying, this movie is kind of the inverse, where, like, yes, the Alien at its core is a slasher movie just dressed up in sci-fi veneer. But with this one, you have a very nuanced alien side of things and like sci-fi side of things, but the main cast is very horror slasher stereotypical.
Yes, they are slasher fodder, and they're written that way, and that's a problem. And here's the thing: the main two characters, you know, so we've got Andy the android, and then we have Kaylee Spinney's character, or what's her name? I forget.
Rain.
Such a sci-fi name. That pissed me off too. I was like, oh, so someone's been playing Japanese RPGs and watching a lot of sci-fi anime where their lead character is named Rain. I didn't mind those two that much, and you can tell that the focus of the screenwriter's energy was to make those two likable, but also put all the empathy on them, right? Everyone else in the cast I could give a shit about. And most people I've talked to felt the same way, where it's like, oh yes, these are disposable characters. To me, what makes Alien, Aliens, and even 3 and 4 work is that the characters were colorful, and even if they weren't likable, they were interesting. They had backstories, they had depth. There's a falseness to the depth they create for these characters that get killed off or whatever happens later in the movie to them before we get to the spoilers part. You don't care about them because all of their backstories or what little we're given is so cliche, and it's just exposition. It's just to get you to the next scene and to understand what a motivation is without making that character colorful or empathetic. That's a huge problem for me in an Alien movie. Prometheus did the same thing too. It's like, you gave us tons of great actors, but you made the characters dull, dumb, and dry. It's like, that doesn't mean anything when their numbers up, right? It's like, yeah, sure, squish them, eat them, acid them. I don't care, because they didn't do anything for the movie.
Yeah, everyone in the main cast follows that horror movie teen trope where their defining characteristic is their personality. So you've got the asshole, you've got the protective big brother, you've got the younger sister, and then you've got the orphan, essentially.
Right.
That's like your core group, and then you also have the
pregnant one,
the cannon fodder. Well, that's the little sister. But like, there's also just the cannon fodder one, the one that's like almost no personality whatsoever, and they're just the one that's very obviously going to go first. Even like we've seen it in the trailers, we know she's going first.
Right.
But overall, I do think that through the first probably how long, this is like almost a 2-hour movie, so probably the first like 70 minutes of this movie I think really worked for me because of how they worked a lot of different elements into it. Like we talked about, Fede Alvarez had directed Don't Breathe. There's like an entire Don't Breathe sequence with the face huggers in this movie.
Which there should be. It works.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Like they're giving a little bit more backstory because they've had like 50 years to study these monsters. Like that. This is somewhat spoiler, but it happens all in the first like 20 minutes of the movie. But we find out that the Romulus and the Remus is a space station that's been studying xenomorphs for a long time, and they've discovered certain things, like they have heat vision and they can hear somehow, or like sonar, and that's how the face huggers are able to find people. And there's a sequence where they basically do a Don't Breathe, and it worked wonderfully. But overall, yeah, I think the movie does fall apart towards the end because it tries to do too many things, which again we'll get more into in spoilers.
So my overall consideration of the Alien, and I mean you have to include Predator in there as well because they're the crossover in the comics, the novels, and even the movies, is that you have two perfect films. You have Alien, the original, and then you have Aliens. And they're both perfect in their own manner. You have the quintessential perfect stalker, haunted house, horror movie with Alien. And then you have the machismo, war as a metaphor, Aliens. Everything else that comes after that is derivative or playing the same, you're trying to play new notes, but you have the same script, and it doesn't work. You're just rehashing everything. And so when it comes down to it is you have to look at this film as where it's going to end up in the also run part of the pact. And for about 75 minutes of its runtime, maybe 80 minutes, it was the top of the heap by a large margin. It was like, oh, okay, someone's kind of cracked the code a little bit. The beginning part with how there's an alien that ties back to, I was like, okay, all right, I'm all right with this. This is, this would make sense within the overall lore. But there was a singular shot in the film, a close-up of a shoe, when I realized everything was going to start falling apart. And that is when it went from top of the heap to tossed upon the heap of the other films looking up. I still think it's a good movie. I got my money's worth. I enjoyed seeing it in IMAX. I had a little clicker with me. Every time Josh covered his eyes, screamed, or curled up in a ball, I would click it. By the way, the number 6. But I might have missed a few because I was doing the same thing at 1 or 2 points because goddamn jump scares pissed me off. Even though I know they're coming. It's like, oh, look, there's a window right in the corner, and they're kind of heading towards it, and they're going to peek through. When is
Lots
it? There
of negative
it is.
space. They're gonna someone's gonna throw their hand up there, or they're gonna like slam a face.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you brought that up with trying to follow the path that other films have started. And my kind of retort to that is I don't think the argument works for true Alien fans, because what this film does instead is it just heavily borrows all the best elements from all those Alien films. So if there's one thing that I can say about 3 and 4, and in a sense even Prometheus to an extent, is that each time they try to do something a little bit different and a little bit more original with the Alien lore. This disappointed me so much because it really didn't do anything original. It really took all of the best beats from the previous movies and built set pieces around them, to the point where it's like, we even get what I was just going to assume was a cameo from someone from the original cast, and then it turned out to be an integral character, and I was just like, you guys are so lazy. Like we were expecting, I was hoping for someone to give me something totally original, and instead I got a playlist of all of the previous installments, including Prometheus, which blew my mind because I thought the whole point of this. Like a part of the press for it was that this was going to be a reinvention of the saga, a reinvention of the alien lore, and not rely on that alternative history that Ridley Scott built with his two prequels, so to speak. And when we get to spoilers, man, it doesn't do that. In fact, it doubles down on that lore. And that just really pissed me off.
That's around the time where I started feeling like the film, the quality of the thing that I was watching just started plummeting. Like there was a little bit of an uptick at one point, and then it went right back down. But yeah, overall, I agree, especially the glorified cameo that we'll talk about here in a second from an alien, quote unquote, veteran, we'll say.
Right.
That I thought was gratuitous. And when they showed it at first, I was like, oh, that doesn't look great. And then it got better at certain points, but overall it's Carrie Fisher and what's his name, Grand Moff Tarkin and Rogue One levels of cringe. And I actually again, we'll talk about it maybe a little bit more when we get into spoilers, but overall there is a noticeable dip in the quality, like I said, when the Prometheus stuff comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think one thing I have to make clear, though, because I've just kind of like, shit on this because that's what was my intention. But I can't say that I did not enjoy or was blown away by the alien effects and the aesthetics and the surroundings. Like Fede Alvarez did an amazing job bringing a crew of technicians together to reinvent the original Alien, but also Alien Isolation aesthetic, where we're kind of like in retro future, which was one of the things that bugged me about Prometheus. Is in Prometheus everything's touch screens, and it seems more modern in our idea of what an interactive interface would be on a spaceship. Where this goes back to like analog buttons and squeaks and boops and R2D2 sounds. I loved
black
that.
Screens with green text.
I loved that. So I think that movie gets an A+ in my book for set design, living in the spirit of the original film,
Mm-hmm.
alien creature effects, going back to practical face huggers and practical xenomorph puppetry and costumes. I loved all of that. It was what was in the movie that bugged me. It's like, you built this beautiful playground, but we're playing Duck, Duck, Goose, and we're not playing like freeze tag, right? Like, we're not playing a great game in this playground. We're playing a very basic by the numbers game.
I do think that comparing it to Alien or Aliens is a little unfair, because I do feel like those are benchmarks that are just like not realistic expectations, especially for modern movies.
Mm-hmm.
And again, speculating some of the studio and producer interference that might have happened in this movie. I think maybe the better benchmark for any modern reinterpretation of these classic horror franchises would be like what Prey did with the Predator franchise. And I will say the first like maybe 60 to 70 minutes of this movie, pretty close to Prey. I don't think it's quite there, because I think Prey is more independent of itself with the Predator franchise, because I think the Predator as a creature, alien, monster, antagonist, whatever you want to call it, the tropes play into what makes that interesting. Whereas with this one, it felt very... a lot of the tropes felt very colored by numbers. You got to have the facehugger moment. You got to have, and they try to do little twists on it, which again, I know that's something you want to touch on, Antonio, in a second here with the facehugger, because some shenanigans happen there. But overall, I think this is definitely not as good as Prey, because it doesn't hit those unique markers like Prey did.
Well, also one of the things that made Prey so good, I think, for us and refreshing is that it wasn't overly ambitious. They weren't trying to top anything. If anything, it's the most rudimentary of the Predator films, right? We're talking about, 1700s Native Americans and then French trappers and muskets and powder guns. Like, that was an excellent concept to do, because it didn't have to try and outdo any of its predecessors, where I feel that this film is literally swimming in a pool of we have to be better than the original. We have to give people more things. And that is a big budget thing. We see that with the MCU movies where they just keep doubling down on effects and doubling down on set pieces and action moments. And there were some in this movie where I was just like, okay, concept wise, that's cool. Maybe even execution wise, it's cool. But now I don't feel like I'm even watching an alien film anymore. I'm watching a Mission Impossible movie in some points where like the suspension of disbelief of what is happening in outer space as this thing is crashing into the rings of this planet. It was just too outlandish for me. And I'll get into that more once we get into spoilers.
I don't know. Maybe I just had a more favorable opinion that it kind of worked for me. I really think, Kaylee Spaney, she was doing her best to protect her brother in that. They sold their roles pretty well. The Farine, he played the asshole well. They tried to give a little backstory of why he's a dick, and I'm just like, yeah, that's great. I'm just waiting for him to die because at this point I just hate him. The person I feel worse about it, I feel had the worst job. Not that she did the worst job, but that she took a lot of shit. And she did it well, was poor Isabel Merced, who we might know her best as Dora the Explorer.
Yeah.
Poor Dora went from exploring jungles with Danny Trejo to laying on a bed for most of this movie because she had morning sickness.
Right.
The worst morning sickness of all time. And thankless. That was the job. That was the worst thing for her. She had a very thankless job of just being there to suffer, which her role really reminded me of the kind of casual, just evilness of the script writer jotting things down. Like the first Jurassic World movie, the poor assistant who has the worst day of her life, trying to take care of these kids who are trying to run away from her, and then everything horrible happens to her, including like the worst death in all of Jurassic World Park movies.
Getting picked up by like a pterodactyl and dropped in a giant sea creature's mouth or something.
Yeah, being dragged and mercilessly just picked upon. Poor. I believe her name is Kay. She's just trying to get through morning sickness and into a cryopod. So I think that worked for me. The set design, the kind of exploration of the world building. I know you were like, well, it's just acknowledging all the other movies, including Prometheus. That's fine. That is perfectly fine. That it acknowledges the continuity versus so many Lego quills, reboot quills, which stake their life on telling fans you have to ignore everything that came before except for the first or second movie, and then we'll pick up from there. And I hate that. I hate that. If you're going to make a Lego quill or reboot a quill or whatever the hell you want to call them that Hollywood does, you have to come with a primer of which movies do I ignore. This one just kind of assumes you've seen Aliens Alien and Aliens. You might remember some bits of the other, and we'll kind of over-explain some of the other stuff to pick up with. I'm perfectly fine with that. The only part that fell off for me is when I think I mentioned to Josh, I felt like I was watching like a DJ do a great remix album, and then all of a sudden the last 20 minutes he accidentally hit play on their band's greatest hits.
That's hilarious. Now, for me, I was just gonna say, like, I know I walked into this, and I've already said I walked into this film with a very strong perception of anticipation and bias, right? Like, not everyone walked into the movie that way, and it's funny because when you read people's reviews, you can tell who had the highest expectations of it being like other movies, and those who just went to go have a good time. If you're just going to have a good time, it's not a bad movie. It's got its faults, but I'm glad to see that it's got high scores. I'm glad to see that it's making money. And I'm glad to see that it means that Alien as a franchise isn't dead, because that's what scared me, is like, this is going to suck so hard that we're not going to get another opportunity for a potentially better Alien film. So if this gets people who weren't very excited about the franchise to begin with excited in it, well, it did its job, and I'm totally cool with that. I'm coming from my standpoint of I had a large sense of bias walking into this, which is why I'm not a critic, guys.
I just pulled up the box office reports. So on a reported budget of 80 million, so roughly assuming 160 million for marketing, which they've gone all out with the marketing for this. It did open to 108 million worldwide, 41.5 million domestically, 66.7 million internationally, with again 108.2 million for the worldwide gross. So I mean that's a pretty good success for an R-rated action movie.
Yeah.
Obviously not Deadpool and Wolverine levels, but I mean Alien is still a franchise that people love, and I think if it gets good word of mouth, it could have decent legs and get a pretty good return on investment.
And also, there is an Alien series coming next year on FX, so the lore is still out there. It's just setting up hype and anticipation for more Alien stuff to come. Maybe at the end of the day, the win for this is that everyone was afraid that now that Disney owns this property, that it was going to get neutered, that it was going to get sanitized or drop the ball on it because no one knows what Disney's going to do. What we've seen with Deadpool, Wolverine, and now what we've seen with this, it shows that they still want Fox to make Fox movies, at least to a point. So if we are going to get more films like this, I feel better about the future, right?
Yeah, my hope is still just that, because I think one of the things that keeps coming back into my train of thought is that this was originally meant to be a Hulu exclusive like Prey was, because Disney was just trying to see what viewership numbers could do, and maybe there down the road there's future and potential for box office return if we do a $40-50 million movie. But then Prey hit it big and they upped the budget and they gave it a theatrical release and delayed it. But I wonder if maybe that delay came with some caveats as well as the inflated budget because of the things that happen with the Prometheus references, which again we'll get into here. But before we do that, let's give our Talking Smack ratings. I'm going to say it's a must-see. I think it's everything we said it is, but it's still a fun watch at the end of the day. You can watch Alien 1, Alien 2, Aliens, and you can skip right into this, and I think you would have a pretty good time.
I'm a must-see. Like, as much as I was disappointed by it, I might even go see it again because it is the reason why we go to theaters, right? This movie looked so good on the big screen. And it was an experience. You know, I'm going to pick apart all the shit that is more about lore than it is about execution. But execution, man, I think Fede Alvarez did a great job. He made an Alien movie for the big screen. He didn't make it smaller, concise, or try to cut corners. They did a great job with its presentation and execution. And so definitely see it on the big screen. If you're going to go see it, there's no reason to wait for video. See it in all the majesty of a large screen. And I'm like you guys. I saw it on an iMac. Well, I saw it on a 4XD with the shaky chairs, which was a little bit much, but it was kind of cool.
It's a must-see for me. I had a good time until I turned off my brain.
Right?
I found it eventually.
I might actually enjoy it a second time because I've taken all the bias out of it. You know, the critical review was first, and now I can go see it again and be like, all right, let's have fun with this shit.
Pull a Justin and just get drunk before you go in.
Right?
just ruin it for everyone. Hey, everyone, that's like in Prometheus. So let's dive into spoilers, shall we?
Okay.
I'm waiting for approval here. I have to say, Andy is my favorite character in this movie. I think that David Johnson is the guy who plays Andy, who is the android for this film, one of two. He just is immediately empathetic, even before you realize that he is an android. I was just like, I like this guy. He better fucking survive.
Well, and the fact that he has to do double duty and play two versions of the same android, right?
And I think that's so interesting. And I think that's
So
the biggest
interesting.
missed opportunity for this movie.
If they do things right, if there is a sequel, this has to focus around him. Like, I think we've learned now from enough franchises, Star Wars especially, that, you know, some characters are thrown in there to be, you know, the sidekick or the hero's journey point where it's like, okay, we need a princess, so we need a pirate, and then they take on a life of their own in this future. That's what I hope this guy becomes. I hope that they are smart enough to realize that this is the character that everyone connected with. And I don't think that's what they intended. I think they wanted us to connect with Rain because she's the protagonist. She's the Ripley of this movie. But at the end of the day, every single person I've talked to said Andy was the best part of this movie.
See, if they make another one of these, I don't think they're going to bring back Andy. They're going to bring back Lance Hendrickson. and they're gonna have him digitally recreated. Or you know what? If they want to just go scorched earth and burn it all down,
All three of them?
no, they'll have Carrie Henn back.
Oh, shit.
And they'll de-age her to like a 3-year-old Newt.
I thought you were going to say they were going to have Ash and David and, Winona Ryder is Call.
Oh my god, yeah.
They were going to have all the androids back for
Oh my god, can you imagine if they did that? They brought them all back.
Well, they already did it with one, essentially. We're in spoiler land now. We can talk about it.
I would burn shit down.
I mean, honestly, when Ian Holm showed up, I was ready to burn shit down because I was like, no ghoulish CGI recreations of this character. And like, Alex, I shared with you the variety piece where they're trying to justify the ends to the means with this because Ash comes back, but it's not Ash, it's Rook. It's a different android, but it's the same model that Ash is. So it's Ian Holm, but it's a CGI Ian Holm, which is what we were talking about with Grand Moff Tarkin and Carrie Fisher in Rogue One. It's just a ghoulish recreation of someone who's passed away, and they've tried to like politispeak it away, where like, oh, we got the blessing from the family, and apparently even over the last like 10 years of his life, Ian Holm felt like the industry turned his back on him. So in a way, we're honoring him by putting him in this movie and not really having to pay him and only giving his estate so much money for digitally recreating him. And I get what they were going for with it. I think in the context of the film, it worked, especially once they put him on a monitor. The CGI recreation looked a lot better because you can grain it out a little bit. But those first few shots of him, like, did not look great.
But there was absolutely no reason for him to be back, especially in the first Alien movie. Nobody knew he was an android.
Right.
That to me more suggests that was like a stealth unit that they built to hang around. This one is just another one they had in the building. Like another, I don't know. It didn't work for me.
It goes to the inconsistencies of the lore, which I'll get to later. But the way I made it work in my headcanon, right, is that all of these androids have different purposes. So they kind of fix that in exposition in this one, where they say that the Andy model is like a mining synthetic, right? That's why he's not super intelligent. And then the Bishop model was like a military synthetic. And Call, we don't really know what Call was in Alien Resurrection because she was designed by androids. So she's kind of got her own thing. So it makes me think that whatever this Ash model is, the Hyperdyne, whatever they call it in Aliens, 1As, they are the science officers, correct? So I think that it kind of makes Alien work even more so, the original, where they didn't know he was an android because they're not a science vessel. They are essentially a tow truck for space minerals and stuff. But they have this guy on board to see if there is anything worth inspecting, which there is. So it made me buy that a little bit more. It's one of the things I kind of took away from this movie. I was like, okay, they retrofitted that well enough for me to buy it, because in that sense, this model of synthetic is the one that's trying to figure out how to dissect this DNA and turn it into something different. And with that, you have almost like this preternatural device in its mind where humans need to be better. Like they're not good enough. And with that kind of programming, current human life is worthless. It's, it's disposable. And that's kind of how it plays. So that worked for me. But at the same time, I didn't think it had to be goddamn Ian Holm. It could have just been any scientific android, and it would have worked just fine, if not better for me.
Which is the android model that canonically likes to seduce itself by playing the flute?
That's the David model.
Oh, okay.
That's Michael Fassbender.
Just checking to make sure that was part of the program and it is officially part of the lore.
Really quick, Alex, do you mind giving like a quick breakdown of like the early story, just of like,
Sure.
we get introduced to Rain and Andy and what's going on and why they have to go up to the Romulus?
It starts off with a visit to the Nostromo, which I thought was beautifully done. They go through the wreckage that's left behind, and you see this ship grab some kind of fossilized thing, bring it into its hold, cut it all, use lasers to cut out whatever's inside of it, and it turns out to be the alien. Which I'm not sure how the alien being ejected kind of fossilizes. Maybe they're saying that because Ripley kind of caught it in some of the propulsion, maybe it charred over itself, but was still fine. That's a little odd. But they take it back to the Remus and Romulus space station to work upon. Then we get introduced to this planet which has, on average, 0 days of sunlight per year. And it's constantly raining. And that's when we meet Rain and Andy, who are miners on this planet. It's a small planet of 2,800 people. And they are servants, work.
Indoctrinated workers, yeah.
Yeah, of, the Wutani Corporation. They have hit their limit and they can leave. That's their goal. Their goal is to get out of here. They're going to take off. They're going to go to a different planet that's 9 light years away that actually has sunlight and get away from this because they've done their service to the company. However, because of worker shortages due to every cycle, there being new plagues, new sicknesses, new deaths, they get given another 12,000 hours, which will take at least 5 to 6 years to work upon. This is also when we find out that Andy is, in fact, an android that was gifted to her by her parents as a caring brother figure who loves to tell dad jokes, but then also gets his ass repeatedly kicked by anyone around him because he's very naive and very trusting. He also has some motor function issues because his hands
He's an
tremble.
old model, so yeah, he has what seems like could be seizures, but it's just which I think to interrupt the recap real quick here, I was really concerned that they were going to play the autism as a superpower.
Thank you, because that's what I thought too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is a nice twist on it. You're not saying he's autistic, you're saying he's you're not, he's playing it a little autistic. That's how that's what I felt from it. But because he's an android, you can reinterpret it. And you're like, okay, I can see what they're going for with this. And it backed me away from being you're creeping me out here.
It's a metaphor, but it was cleverly veiled, and I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at first I was concerned about that because it could be taken as very disrespectful. I was getting a lot of Rain Man vibes from it, especially the interaction with one protecting the other kind of thing. But the way they lean into it as this model is built for this, which is why you don't need fine motor skills, you don't need fine intelligence, stuff like that. Especially it allows the actor, when he gets chip put in that gives him additional powers, security upgrades, he even mentions a long overdue fine motor skills upgrade as well. So it's built into the model, he just doesn't have access to it. And then he becomes very smooth, very adroit. It changes his physical presence completely, which all props to that actor. Completely sold it. Everything from his posture to his facial mannerisms, his speech and tone, just completely is elevated as he gets these elevated security statuses.
Well, essentially, he becomes the same model as the Rook android or the Ash android, because they pulled those programmings from that droid that's on the ground in pieces. So whatever his internal structure already is, it's just upgraded by whatever their program is. And that was probably one of the most clever pieces of writing. To go back really fast, though, Alex, to why the alien was in a tomb, I think what they were trying to say, because we haven't really seen it in alien lore, it's been in the novels and it's been in some deleted scenes from other movies, but that chrysalis form that these creatures can do. My assumption is because we see the chrysalis form in the scene where Bjorn tries to poke it with a prodder before he gets acided. Which so stupid.
Okay, wait. So that reminds me, and this needs to be addressed. The Alien franchise has had the very, very lightly veiled, I'm not even sure if you can call it lightly veiled, the Alien franchise is about assault and very obvious genital metaphors.
Right.
That was a vagina on the wall.
It definitely was. It definitely was.
Zack Snyder was very proud of that one.
There's no veil. There is absolutely no veil when it's like on the wall, and that's what it is.
It's totally what it is, and that's what
Oh
I
my
think.
gosh.
That's what I think they found in space. Is what they're trying to say is that while in its defense mode of floating around in space, as Rook says, it essentially crystallizes itself,
Interesting.
and that's what kind of preserves it in space. I'm going to go on my spiel later about that because I'm going to come back to that in a million ways. But continue.
So she's mad. She gets a text from a friend who she's estranged from, and it is the other 4 band of merry sacrifices. There is Tyler, who is the older kind of like take charge. He's in paint banks.
He's
loves
the
Andy.
handsome jock.
Oh yeah, he loves Andy. As soon as he sees Andy, even from like a far distance, he's like tells him a dad joke, which I love that. You have his younger sister, Kay, Isabella Merced. She that is Dora the Explorer. She is secretly pregnant, and then that's not important for about 58 minutes. You have the asshole Spike Fern, who's Bjorn, who hates androids because apparently one of the mining androids made a decision to kill his parents because there was a mining collapse, and he decided to leave them there, which is explained away by, well, androids can't hurt people, but his decision was sacrifice 3 and save 128. And
Right.
so they are able to make the railroad car decision.
I think it was less than that even. I think they said it was like sacrifice 3 to save 12 or something
It was
like
12,
that.
yeah. Essentially, he pulled the Bryan Cranston and Godzilla move.
Yeah, it was a minuscule number. Like
Okay.
it was almost like 15 people total, but for that mining colony, it's a huge deal.
Yeah. And then you have Aline Wu, who's playing Navarro, who is the pilot of the ship and is Bjorn's girlfriend. They let her know that they've detected, while doing some kind of like exploration stuff, that there is a freighter up in space that happens to have exactly 5 pods, and they seem to be charged for cryosleep. And if we can just sneak on up there.
My question is that how the hell did the company not recognize their own bioweapons lab floating around the planet before these ragtag kids did? That pissed me off.
Oh, you know, it's profit and losses, and when you look at the margins, what is one floating bioweapons lab that is about to
Right.
that is about to be destroyed by the asteroid ring of this planet?
But like the only way I could like explain it to myself is like, well, it's so secret that not even Wayland Yutani knows about it, even though their logo is all over the goddamn spaceship.
Well, you know, it takes 6 to 9 months for signals to bounce back and forth, as they explained. I don't know. But they need Andy because all the androids which are created by the company have access to the company facilities in some form or fashion. And as long as they promise to be nice to Andy, she goes along with it. And then they can have the 5 pods, and Andy can watch over them, and they can sail away to another planet in 9
And
years.
then alien shenanigans ensue. Yeah, with Andy, I think it's also implied that because he is an older model, like I think they say that he's a predecessor to even Ash or Rook, but because his operating system is compatible with the mother operating system is why he's essential to this mission.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
he can open doors and pretty much run the ship.
Which I have a question about that before we get too far distracted. All he has to do is poke something. Couldn't they have borrowed like a finger? Because it really seems like he just sticks it in, and there's like and he even goes,
He's an
"Ow."
artificial person. If you take away the
Right.
finger, there's no more electricity flowing through there. You can't get the right data read.
It's not like he has like a little R2D2 like Probulus or RoboCop in his
Okay.
his Wolverine
His
claw.
one
that he-
Wolverine claw, yeah.
Yeah. True. Yeah. But I mean, you can't. There's not much to talk about when it comes to alien shenanigans. Of course, you're gonna find out the company's been up to some shit. There's been some backstabbing. The reason why the place is abandoned is because the aliens are aliening and taking out everything. The design of this xenomorph was beautifully fantastic, intimidating, and real. You can tell that it's a physical prop that's there.
It's the best looking one in my opinion since Alien 3. Like,
Yes.
they did a lot of CG and a lot of rubbery looking ones for all of the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that they looked terrible, but this really made me feel like I was watching like the Ridley Scott, but especially the James Cameron Aliens. And it was the same crew from Aliens in 1986, and that's why it does look so good.
And even in the close-ups of when like it's like hissing and stuff, it has that like overly textured kind of rubbery flappy top lip above the like the metal teeth kind of thing, which is the physical prop, because in the 70s and 80s they didn't get the fine motor skills thing going, so it's just kind of vibrating in its place and thing, which works. It's a great callback.
Still works.
It's intimidating because you're not looking at like this flappy lip, you're looking at the teeth and the thing coming out, and you get the glory shot from the trailer of that acid floating in space and zero G of all those creatures. It's just so much of the movie works.
I think one of the biggest missed opportunities in this movie, if again, just taking it at face value without going into like fixes that I would do, I think going into aliens instead of alien, because the creature design is fantastic, like we said, and they even went the extra mile and gave the one alien a distinctive feature so that it's that alien amongst the other xenomorphs that are there.
Correct.
Its face is cracked, and apparently there's like electricity just running through it because it interrupted the chrysalis portion of its evolution. But as far as I am aware, as far as I saw, we only see like that xenomorph come back once after the initial reveal of that xeno, and that's in the elevator shaft towards the end, just before where I think everything just starts to go way downhill in terms of quality. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, I see him, I know who it is, but movie's over. Like, why is this guy a threat anymore? We've made all the other Xenos and the facehuggers a bigger threat than this guy. This guy's just come back. Like he's just there again. And I think not having him be the one Xeno throughout the movie, like you can have the facehuggers and like maybe he's trying to make more, or like there's the ticking clock on top of crashing into the rings of the planet, is that there will be more Xenos coming because they've abducted and implanted all the other crew members or something, or like because they've raised the temperature of the space station, all the sleeping crew members that were now in some primitive form of cryosleep are waking up and they're gonna burst. But like there's something missing in that sequence, and I think part of it is the fact that they have this memorable Xeno look and they just cut to it and they rely on it once after the initial reveal.
Very well said. Let's keep going, because I have all of my rants planned into one mega rant, and I don't want to break it up because then it's not going to be as effective.
Alex, you can go first, and then we'll let Antonio do the mega rant.
It's worth watching. We already gave it. The three of us already said we liked it. Josh and I pretty much agree. It's basically good up until a certain point. The exact moment that that the movie kind of lost me is when they did a close up of Rain descending like the ladder, and they did a close up of her in the Sigourney Weaver's Reeboks. That is when I was like, oh no. And then there is, then there is you get away from her, and then this long dramatic pause. You bitch. It was just like not needed. Okay.
They do so many aggressive winks to the audience that those are the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. In the final 30 minutes, like they just cram in. Let's make a reference to everything in the Alien franchise in these last 30 minutes, because we're just going to give everyone that endorphin rush.
And because so many people of every gender knows and was sexually awakened by Sigourney Weaver in the white tank top with the little tidy whities, they had to put Rain in a white tank top with booty shorts.
Crawling into a spacesuit.
Yeah, crawl into a spacesuit. It ends up the last bit of it, in that spacesuit. But this is my final thing on it. I know we're supposed to be sympathizing with Rain and Andy, and yes, Andy is the best character. I absolutely adore Andy. But Kay had the worst day of her life. She was sick. She was throwing up. She then thought she was escaping, gave birth, had her umbilical cord ripped apart, and then her baby ate her for sustenance. If there is no more blatant metaphor for what women go through, for pregnancy and birthing and the horrors and traumas that is experienced upon bodies, she experienced it all in about 48 minutes.
Yeah, but that's on her because she injected herself, bro.
Oh, so you're saying it's the woman's fault?
I'm saying if you don't know what's in a tube, don't put it in your body, regardless of
Facts.
gender.
I know. I was just like, oh, she's already having a horror. This is terrible. This is terrible. Please, just okay. She had to experience that. Please, just let her alone. Just let her alone. Be creepy. Be weird. Like have it like suckling from her for some reason, but to have it like emasculate her. Was it emasculation when like your entire body's withered and drained because it's like sucking the life and fluid and member out of her desiccated body. There we go, desiccated body, and then dumped. And I'm like, oh my god, this poor person.
At least it didn't go the direction that I thought it was gonna go. I thought it was gonna like do a weird breastfeeding scene, and it didn't.
I would have been fine with that compared to death because she deserved to be in one of the pods, man.
But she's not a virgin, and we're holding to the teen slasher rules
the
here,
John
too.
Carpenter rules of teen horror.
I know. Okay, so that's basically it. I was just like, the second I saw the Reebok and then the bitch and then like the tidy whities,
the pulse rifles.
That was cool.
I thought the pulse rifles were pretty cool.
The auto walk on.
Again, I don't want to step on your toes, Antonio, with your mega rant coming up here. But with the Prometheus reveal, where they even call it like the Prometheus vial or something like that, that whole sequence, because like we talked about earlier, I thought this was basically doing like a soft reboot, or it was just not going to acknowledge the Prometheus and Covenant stuff because no one liked it.
I thought everyone was trying to get away from it.
Yeah, exactly. And so like let's go back to the xenomorph just being this anomalous thing that just is terrorizing the universe for some reason somehow. And like, okay, yeah, we did the thing where they went to the Nostromo and we brought it back and now shit's happening again. All of that worked for me, but then we go back to, well, we went to go get it because we needed to find the way to make people be able to work for the rest of their lives in any environment. And it's like, yes, the company sucks, but the reason they want the xenomorph is because they want to like create the fountain of youth, or they want a bioweapon. Oh, it's because they want to create the fountain of youth so people can work for them forever. Okay, that's menacing in a real world way, but like that's kind of stupid in this universe.
I agree, but there's also a part of me that wonders that if Rook went rogue and essentially did that all himself, because that's the vibe I was getting, because we see David do that in the Prometheus and Covenant movies. Essentially, we see Ash kind of doing that in the first one, where these synthetics, they're the ones that kind of have figured it out, and they're the ones that are kind of the responsible for the deaths of all these humans. So that's where I was kind of coming from, where maybe this wasn't necessarily a company order. He's just working off of his prime directive, which is make the company better and stronger, and AI has calculated that. So I kind of give that actually a little bit of a pass, because I think it was Rook all along and not necessarily the company. But that doesn't forgive the company for the stupidity that's in my rant.
Okay. We've been waiting now. Let's hear it.
Okay.
Go for your rant.
All right. I'm going to put my Dennis Miller suit on and large 80s Dennis Miller hair before I start ranting. Okay, so here's the thing. If people are going to get pissed off at Alien Resurrection for cloning Ripley to extract a queen out of her after she died in the third one, if they're going to give that movie shit, then they either have to shut up and give it a pass, if they're going to accept the fact that they're going to float around space looking for the ruins of a Nostromo, just hoping to find a fossilized xenomorph that they can create more facehuggers from, which it wasn't even a queen. Now, we still don't know all of the biophysics of that. Like, we do see in the director's cut of the first one that the xenomorph can create eggs and then create a queen, but they cut that out. So, or didn't we hear in Alien and Aliens that they picked up this egg on LV-426? So why didn't they just go back to LV-426 where the ship's computer was? Obviously, that's where they picked up the alien egg. But no, they're going to waste time floating around space looking for a fossilized xenomorph. Go fuck yourself. That is not good writing. They even mention it in Aliens in a cutscene too, where it's like they've now terraformed LV-426. She tells them that they found this egg there. Paul Reiser sends people out there to get the egg, and that's why there's aliens on LV-426. But they completely hope that we would not recognize the fact that the company would have been able to figure out easier that they got this egg from the planet they touched down from, but instead they're going to go float around looking for a fossilized version of it. That pissed me off. That's rant number 1. And you guys have anything to say about that?
No counter argument to me. The only thing I will say is they wanted to do that so that they could do the like broken puppet with the harpoon through its chest.
Right.
To be like, remember from Alien?
This is true. They want, again, that's a wink. Okay, so that's wink number 1. So the next part of this thing that kind of pisses me off is now we're on the ship, which is essentially the alien isolation ship. I know it's not the same ship, but it looks just like it. And we're messing around with timelines now, right? Because this is supposed to be 20-something years after the events of Alien 1, which means we still have another 30-something years before the events of Aliens. So all these things have happened with xenomorphs, yet the company still doesn't really know about xenomorphs when we get to Aliens. They try to do a lot of retconning and retrofitting of the story. I get it. That's fine. That's okay. But there's inconsistencies because what they say is they tell Ripley that it takes decades, 20, 30 years to terraform a planet, which is why they were able to terraform LV-426. But now we're 20 years, 30 years before that, and they are working on a terraformed planet, and that's why everyone's getting sick. But Ripley had never heard of terraforming in Aliens, so now you've created another chasm of logic in your storytelling. You've messed with the timeline trying to retrofit things that this should be still an era where terraforming doesn't exist, but they screwed it up. So that's rant number 2.
That to me, I think is more of a nitpicky thing that can be solved because I believe it's 76 years that Ripley was floating in space.
57.
57. Okay, so all right, so this is one of the first of the terraformed places. So it's only been like 20-something years. The company then goes, finishes finding the data logs, goes to LV-246, and starts terraforming that one. Has multiple programs running in. So I mean, it all fits within the timeline. Yeah, that's a little nitpicky.
But all these kids were essentially born on this planet, which means it was already terraformed for 20 years. So just to put a little bit more reflection in this is still only like 30 years after Alien Covenant and after Prometheus, and terraforming isn't even a thing. They've only terraformed Mars, according to the video they watch in Alien Covenant. I digress. That was a problem for me. I don't like it when people mess with timelines when they're trying to make something canon, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get into... I'm going to skip all the stuff that I liked about the movie. All the alien shenanigans we talked about, right?
It's great. It's fantastic. The design's great. I love that the face huggers are fantastic.
Right. All that stuff.
Yeah, making the face huggers a legitimate threat and not just a precursor to anything, I think was a really good choice because you added menace to them because they're an amazing creature design and they kind of get underutilized because it's just, oh, look at how terrifying it is because it's going to plant an egg and it's going to burst out of their chest. But like the hunting that they can do is also important.
Well, and the fact that they hoard, right? Like we never get to see them hoard before, and that was cool. It reminded me of the video games, the old arcade video games where you have to shoot like hundreds of them. It was like that. It was an homage to that, so I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's go to the rant at the end, where one of the biggest hate bombs for the Alien franchise was an Alien Resurrection with the newborn, which was essentially a genetic mix-up of human DNA and alien DNA, where the queen gives live birth, not egg birth, to a more kind of fleshed out humanoid type newborn xenomorph. and people shat on it. They hated it. I didn't hate it as much. I thought it was a bit hokey, but it kind of goes along with the campiness of that movie, so I give it a guilty pleasure pass. But you can't hate that concept now with the bullshit that they pull in this one, where in a matter of minutes,
Yeah.
like 10 minutes,
If
this
that.
girl injects herself, gives birth, and instantly has a full-grown alien-human hybrid from the black alien goo that we were trying to get away from Prometheus and from Covenant. Now the goo is back. We've got this hybrid, which it reminded me of like the tall, skinny, thin man from what's that movie? It Follows.
Yeah.
Who pops up in the hallway. I might think it might even be the same actor, but it's the same thing. And they're shitting on Alien Resurrection, but everyone's loving this one. I'm like, are you not? To quote Kathy Bates, are you gone insane? Like from he didn't get out of the cockadoodie car. It's the same goddamn alien, and I can't give that a pass. Do we all have amnesia?
I have never hated Resurrection. I can understand the dislike people have for it because it's not what people are expecting. But the child, the hybrid alien from that movie, like I understood what was happening there.
Mm-hmm.
With this one, I absolutely hated it because, among other things, it was like a third ending to this movie. And I'm like, there's too much shit happening here because we just finished in the elevator shaft and then we get into the transport and then we've got getting out of the orbit and having to deal with Rook. And then now we have to deal with this new hybrid alien of the engineers and the xenomorph. And it's too much. Like the one fix I would have in this movie is I would get rid of the Prometheus shit and be like, we tried and we failed. And like, maybe you can have your engineer xenomorph hybrid in some fashion in the movie because that's your failure is you injected someone with it and they transformed into that. I don't know. But I think the way this movie needed to end is with what they set up prior with Andy after he gets his upgrades. Rain asks like to herself just kind of out loud, are you still in there? And I think that needed to be something that Andy is dealing with, like constantly dealing with what's his programming versus him being an artificial person.
Give her the line, let her deliver it. Are you still in there? Close up on Andy's face, cut to black, roll credits. I would have stood up and applauded because it sets you up for something in the future, but it also leaves that ambiguous nature that we are so craving. Because guys, I knew they were going to pull some fuckery because I'm like, okay, they're already playing all the beats from Alien 1, right? So the hand's going to pop out of the cryo tube like it does in the first one. What's that moment going to be? There's going to be something that happens and it's this crazy birth scene. And then we have to fight this fucking thing.
To me, it reminded me of the Batman. I would say the Batman probably would have been the second best Batman movie made if it had stopped with the interrogation scene with the Riddler and Riddler haven't figured out who Batman is.
Right.
And instead you have another 25 minutes of over-the-top explosion, drowning an entire city, flooding, and uselessness. If this movie had stopped with getting maybe like the three of them into the ship and just like flying away into the unknown, like leave it ambiguous. Maybe you don't know if Kay injected herself and she's been put into cryo sleep. Is Andy's programming switched back or not? Now, but now they're going to cryo and he's in charge of the ship. So what is that going to mean? And they're heading away to some planet.
Right, because that's essentially how Covenant ended, where David does the switcheroo, and then we don't know what the ending's going to be, and we probably never will, and that's fine because I don't care.
How dare you? Because if I suffered through Prometheus and Covenant, and the most interesting part of that to me was that ending of like this actually should have been where Prometheus picked up is like David doing his shenanigans on a ship full of people or whatever. That would have been great.
I would have bought that.
Instead, it was terrible. I would have
much rather had David than Rook, 100%.
Yeah. What bothered me about it is like it was the casual disregard of Noomi Rapace's character, with the whole like, oh yeah, by the way, she's dead. I was experimenting on her, and there's
I
like
created xenomorphs out of her.
I
bowels.
hated that. I absolutely hated that so much.
Me too.
It was such a throwaway of a strong character.
If they're doubling down on the Prometheus stuff, what probably could have worked really well is the android on deck is David, and his hubris has led him to being destroyed by his own creation.
That would be
But
cool.
then
That's what I was saying.
and
That should be great. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's continue with the mega rant.
Okay, so I'm going to close it up here. Closing statement. And this is really, I'm going to say, the fault of the screenwriters, which Fede Alvarez is one of them. This is an alien movie, right, guys? So why is the greatest tension created by the lack of time they have before the ship crashes into the planet's rings? I hate it when movies write themselves into a corner by having some kind of time frame they have to operate in, because then what you do is you trip over logic. So I've always had a huge issue with, as these alien movies keep getting more and more down the road, the physics of xenomorphs changes, where gestation time in the first two movies was like a day, day and a half. Then it pops out of you. Then you got another day or two before it's, fully grown and killer. And each movie they make it, okay, now it's half an hour. Now it's 15 minutes. And in this movie, it's this is the worst part of the movie. So they have something like 30 hours to get everything completed is what they say. But by the time everything happens, they've only got 40 minutes because the ship crashed into the ship, pushing its orbit closer to the ring. So now they have 40 minutes to get off the ship. By creating that bottleneck of a time frame for shit to happen, you're now messing with the physics of these aliens. So now chest bursts have to happen faster. Literally, that character, Navarro, she gets egged and burst in just a run down the ship to their little getaway ship. That's like a 10-minute run, and she bursts in that 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then within that 30 minutes left of that 40, we now have a full-grown xenomorph chasing these people. So it just makes all of your action scenes less logical because you've created a bottleneck of a time frame for your movie to operate in. You didn't have to do that. Audiences are smart.
You're not 100% wrong here. I think you're like 90% right. But if I'm remembering the time frame right, so they safely dock into one of the corridors because that's just going to be their quick escape route once they get their fuel cells. Then she gets face hugged, and then through the process of the face or the chest bursting, that's when she creates the destruction of the Remus to throw its orbit off and accelerate the time into the rings. And then, but you're still right about the alien bursts. It goes, finds a little nook and sheds its skin and creates the chrysalis. And they're like, oh, we've got 45 minutes to go. And like within 5 minutes, the alien has chest bursted, shed its skin, created the chrysalis, been cattle prodded, and hatched into a fully grown Xeno within like you said, 5 to 10 minutes.
It just makes me upset at screenwriters, and because this isn't the only movie that does that. And so why are you creating like this cheap moment of tension and suspense by giving yourself a clock? Like once you set that shot clock, your movie now operates in that. And if you don't follow the rules of that clock, then people are going to call bullshit. The same way they call bullshit if a guy shoots, 12 rounds out of a 6-round gun. Like it's that kind of suspension of disbelief where if you're trying to really make your movie serious and believable, you put the money and the budget into your sets and your effects. Why are you messing with the logics of the story by creating a bottleneck time frame? It's really stupid. A real simple fix that you could do is you have Andy trying to stop Navarro from getting on the ship because he knows what's happened with the facehugger. Even though, again, we've cut down that time where in previous movies the facehugger has been on for like days at a time or hours. Right.
And I did like the added lore stuff where it shows like the pulsating that the facehugger does is actually breathing for the person.
Yeah.
I like that. It's like they're ventilating them while they're implanting them. I like that a lot. But a real easy fix that I was talking about is you have Bjorn like take control of the ship, and he crashes it into something because he doesn't know how to fly. Like Navarro is the only one that knows how to fly, so Bjorn crashes it. Like you don't have to do the whole thing where he cracks a fuel cell and it pushes the thing. Your ticking clock is just simply repairs. We're taking the time to repair the ship, and now you have all the time in the world. You have your 36 hours, but it's still something where you can take a day and a half to fix the ship, and now you still have 2 hours to get out of there before it crashes into the rings. It's a real simple fix,
Right.
and it doesn't cut that time down too much.
And it's so simple that is how the first Alien operates, is that it took them like 20 hours to repair on the surface of the planet, which gives them all that time for Kane to be gestating. Then they get on the ship, and it gives it that much time to happen before the dinner scene. Like, they did the math in reverse. They gave you extended amounts of time for things to happen. And here's the thing. You can cut time away in your editing and in your storytelling, but you can't add time.
Mm-hmm.
So they should have done that. It's like the measure twice, cut once. It's like, don't write yourself into a bottleneck.
They did the inverse of what they should have done
Exactly.
with all their references, because like
They'll reference everything else.
yeah, they're like, let's just do an entire Alien sequence now. Okay, let's do
Right.
an entire Alien Resurrection sequence, which apparently Fede Alvarez does not know that he aped Alien Resurrection in the same Variety piece where we talked about getting the Ian Holm Estate's blessing to make a CGI ghoul of himself. Fede Alvarez says that, like, oh, his son, the day before the premiere, saw Alien Resurrection, and then he saw the premiere and he saw the movie, and he's like, hey, did you know you made the same ending as Alien Resurrection? He's like, no, I didn't even know. Bullshit, you didn't.
Bullshit, you didn't.
I do think that, and I've shared this with Alex, I do think that there is some Ridley Scott bullshit going on here, because again, we talked about how they got a bigger budget because
Yep.
Prey did well. And once they got the bigger budget, I think Ridley Scott also went, we need to tie this into Prometheus. Like, I will give my blessing on this movie. I'll be part of the press tour if you acknowledge Prometheus as well as just Alien. Like, I don't want my Prometheus movies to mean nothing. Like I said, there's an obvious decline in quality once the Prometheus stuff comes into play. Although I do think the zero gravity acid blood sequence, which Antonio, maybe you have a different feeling on it, but I think that's like the last really great moment in the movie. Although I will say that the shot of Rain dangling over the planet's rings is also, it's like a beautiful shot, but I don't know if I would say it's a great moment.
Yeah.
But the last great moment in the movie is the zero gravity acid blood scene, and then everything from there is you go from like an 85-90 to 40 to 25 in terms of like scale and how good it is at that point.
Yeah. No, I'll give you all that.
So I'm just going to put this out here. There is an Alien franchise movie where there is a ticking clock, and the ticking clock plays out in real time, and it is done to perfection. That is, of course, the ending of Aliens, where Sigourney Weaver has 15 minutes, and it literally plays out in real time.
Right, but that's your finale. They didn't put your whole movie in the bottleneck.
Correct. In this movie, I saw an interview with the director. Once the computer says 30 minutes, the movie ends in 30 minutes. It's 30 minutes from when the computer says it, Romulus impact starting to destroy it.
Right.
So they purposely did it to acknowledge another franchise, which is why the Reebok shot is the downfall of this movie.
It's like she can afford those Reeboks on that planet, but she can't afford anything else.
Reebok is an official sponsor of Wayland Yutani. Every employee gets their own pair.
Right.
And Chuck Taylor. Because I saw like quite a few like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Chucks haven't changed their design in like 70 years. Why not change their design in 400?
Yeah. I think they're wearing Chucks in the first Alien too. At least one of them is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I do think that, like, while we have all of these critiques of the film, which I don't think are unwarranted, I do think that it's fun, and if you're just looking for a good time with an Alien movie, I think it's there to be had. But if you are going in kind of in a similar mindset with Antonio, where you're looking to see what it builds on within the franchise, I do think that there is a level of disappointment as well. especially when we start taking into account the fact that this movie goes out of its way to justify the existence of, at the very least, Prometheus as well as Alien Covenant, which legitimately for me feels like a slap in the face, because I think with the only expectation I had going into this movie was, we're just not going to talk about Prometheus and Covenant. Like, we're just going to pretend that those happened, and the company's like, oh, they went missing. Oh, well.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, I might enjoy it more the second go around because I've gotten all of the poison out of my blood, and I can just sit and watch the movie that they made for
Take it in
audiences
for what
that
it is.
aren't so critical, right?
Yeah, it's a good time.
All right. Well, with that, let's start wrapping up here. Antonio, please let everyone know where they can find you and your podcasts. Multiple, plural.
Well, I'll just talk about the two that are currently going right now. So the first is the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast, which brand new episodes air the first week of September. I took July and June off and was playing some retro episodes from the Cultworthy Classic, taking a little break and kind of like refacing the show. So we'll have Justin Henson, my co-host from my other show, Back to the Balcony, opening up the new season with our High School Royale series that we do every back-to-school season, where we talk about high school movies, cult-worthy ones for sure. And then I've got some great guests coming up. I've got some really great podcasters. I've got some people in the industry. I'm really excited about like the first 10 episodes of the new season. And then Back to the Balcony, my Siskel and Ebert podcast with Justin Henson of the Movie Wire, where we will talk about a film that Siskel and Ebert reviewed on their show, and then we will critique the critics and see how their reviews held up in these modern times with what we know about movies and the industry and how has it aged. You know, a lot of those 80s movies didn't really age well.
Have you done The Thing yet?
No, we haven't.
Oh, you've got to do that one. It is so delicious.
They've got a lot of hot takes on some movies. Pretty much what we're doing right now is we're going through episodes of their show first, where they had a lot of kind of interesting critiques for movies that have, you know, now been looked at as cult classics or rediscovered favorites, and wondering why they dropped the ball. Why didn't they get on the fun bus? And we recently had Josh on to talk about Star Trek The Motion Picture, which he had never seen. And that's a good episode. It'll be out in a few weeks.
Ooh.
Obviously, being the resident Star Trek expert, I was the only choice they could have for that episode. But it was a good time. It was a good discussion. And yeah, I appreciate them giving me an excuse to watch the first Star Trek movie. Now I can get Matt off my back for maybe another week.
There you go.
Alex, let everyone know about our Discord.
We have a Discord. It is a Discord unlike any you've ever been on before. It is a Discord of truths, of enlightenment, and a lot of really bad takes. You should join it. You can find it at tsmackpod@gmail.com. Just click that little link down here in the podcast button.
And who's doing our remix?
Oh, we have Benjamin Wolfisk. He has done some amazing movies. He's on a fire right now. Twisters, Alien Romulus, Kraven the Hunter, did The Flash, 13 Lives, Hellboy. He's the man.
All right, and don't forget to check out my Mind Wipe episode on casting views. Again, that'll be in the episode description. Follow us on all the social medias at Talking Smack Pod, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, Hive Social, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Lonnie's website. Email us your thoughts, questions, reviews of anything we're talking about or anything you're seeing. We want to hear it all. tsmackpod@gmail.com. Thank you to Leo Allen for our musical themes that you're hearing right now, Beppo for original avatars, Retro Ale Studios for our Rinky avatar. Please like, subscribe, rate, review on your podcatcher of choice. And Antonio, thank you again so much for having been here.
My pleasure, guys.
Alex, thank you as always for being here. And most importantly, thank you, dear listener, for taking the time to listen to this. We will see you next week when we do some quick hits. Yeah, we'll see you next week when we do quick hits. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next time.
I think if Fede really, really wanted to stick it to Ridley Scott, he would have had someone running away from an object that could have been just taking a hallway to the left or the right, but just kept
Turn
going
left!
forward. It would have been great.
Watch Star Trek.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.